This family is honestly embarrassed to even share a last name with you. That's what my younger brother Drew said into a microphone at our grandmother's 82nd birthday party, in front of 30 relatives, 2 caterers, and my 8-year-old daughter. I didn't flinch. I didn't leave. I set my fork down, looked him square in the eye, and said, "I heard you, Drew. I think everyone in this room heard you." And they had, every single one of them. What Drew didn't know, what none of them knew, was that by the time those words left his mouth, the documents had already been signed, the trust had already been amended, and the family empire he'd been coasting through for a decade was already gone. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you've ever been the one your family overlooked while pouring everything into someone else, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is for you. Let me take you back. My name is Sage Caldwell. I'm 36 years old. I'm a senior financial analyst at one of the largest banks in Charlotte, North Carolina. I earn $185,000 a year in base salary, plus roughly $40,000 in performance bonuses. I've been promoted 3 times in 7 years. My reviews are flawless. My colleagues respect me. My daughter Lily is 8 years old, and she is my entire world. But if you asked my mother, Jennifer Caldwell, what I did for a living, she'd wave her hand and say something like, "Oh, Sage pushes numbers around. It's not exactly exciting." If you asked my father, Richard, he wouldn't say anything at all. He'd just clear his throat and look at his plate the way he's done for 30 years. And if you asked my brother Drew, he'd laugh. He'd actually laugh. Then he'd say I got lucky, that anyone could sit behind a desk and stare at spreadsheets, and that the real work, the important work, happened at Caldwell Shore Properties, the family real estate company our grandmother built from nothing in 1974. Drew was 31, 5 years younger than me. He held the title of Director of Client Relations at Caldwell Shore Properties. The title sounded impressive. The reality was different. Drew's job, as far as anyone could tell, consisted of taking clients to golf courses, expensing $4,000 weekends on the company card, and drawing a monthly salary of $12,500 for work that nobody could define and nobody dared question. $12,500 a month. For showing up when he felt like it. For crashing a $92,000 company-owned Mercedes into a guardrail after a weekend in Hilton Head and having the company quietly absorb the $14,000 insurance deductible and the premium spike that followed. For running up gambling debts that the firm's operating account covered as miscellaneous business development expenses. That was Drew's contribution to the family legacy. Mine was different. Mine was invisible. 15 years ago, when I was 21, I sat at the kitchen table in our parents' house in Raleigh and listened to my mother explain that my college fund, the one Grandma Evelyn had set aside for both of us, had been redirected. All of it. Every dollar. Funneled into Drew's tuition at Mecklenburg Preparatory Academy, a private boarding school that cost more per semester than most people's annual mortgage. "Drew needs structure," my mother said, not even looking up from her magazine. "You're resourceful. You'll figure it out." I figured it out. I worked night shifts at a distribution warehouse from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 4 nights a week. I carried a full course load during the day. I applied to every scholarship I could find, merit-based, need-based, essay-based, department-specific. I graduated at the top of my class with a degree in finance and $11,400 in student loans that I paid off in 14 months. My mother's response when I told her I'd been hired at the bank? She tilted her head and said, "That's nice, honey. When are you going to get a real job?" Dad said nothing. He never did. Drew, meanwhile, flunked out of Mecklenburg Prep after 2 years. Nobody talked about it. He was quietly enrolled in a state school, graduated with a 2.1 GPA in general studies, and walked directly into a corner office at Caldwell Shore Properties the following Monday. No interview. No probationary period. No questions. That was the pattern. It had always been the pattern. When Drew needed a down payment on his first condo, Dad wrote the check. When Drew's credit card debt hit $27,000 from bottle service tabs and weekend trips to Atlantic City, Mom called the family accountant and had it folded into the company's books. When Drew wanted a boat, they leased him one through the business. When I needed help covering Lily's emergency room visit 3 years ago, $4,800 for a broken arm after a fall at the playground, my mother told me I should have better insurance. I paid the bill myself. I always pay the bills myself. But the bill that weighed on me most wasn't mine. It was Grandma Evelyn's. 3 years ago, when Evelyn turned 79, her health required more specialized care. Not because her mind was going. Evelyn Caldwell's mind was sharper than anyone's in that family, including mine. But her mobility had declined, and she needed daily assistance, medication management, physical therapy. The kind of care that costs real money. Private nursing care. $4,200 a month. My parents' solution was simple. Liquidate Evelyn's personal assets. Sell the jewelry she'd collected over 60 years. Cash out the small investment accounts she'd built on her own. Strip her down to nothing so they wouldn't have to spend a dime of the company's money or their own on the woman who had built the company in the first place. I couldn't let that happen. So every month, for 3 years, I logged into my banking app and transferred $4,200 to the care facility. Quietly. Without telling anyone except Evelyn herself. No announcement. No family meeting. No request for reimbursement. $4,200 a month. For 36 months. Totaling $151,200. I paid it while my mother mocked my cheap dresses. I paid it while my father pretended I didn't exist at family dinners. I paid it while Drew expensed his golf weekends and crashed company cars and gambled away money that should have gone to property maintenance. Evelyn knew. She was the only one who knew. And every time I visited her at the care facility on Sunday mornings, just me and Lily, bringing her favorite lemon cake from the bakery on Park Road, she'd hold my hand and say, "You're the only one who remembers what family actually means." I thought she was just being kind. I didn't realize she was making a decision. Now let me tell you about the party. Grandma Evelyn's 82nd birthday, a Saturday evening in late September. My parents rented the back terrace of a restaurant in South Charlotte. White tablecloths, string lights threaded through the oak trees, $200 a plate catering with past appetizers and a 3-tier cake. 30 guests. Extended family, a few of Evelyn's old friends from the real estate association, and every single person who mattered in the Caldwell orbit. Lily and I arrived at 6. I was wearing a navy dress I'd bought on sale 2 years earlier. It was clean, pressed, and appropriate. Lily wore a white sundress with small yellow flowers. She'd picked it out herself and spent 20 minutes in front of the mirror making sure the bow in the back was straight. We walked in, and the first thing I heard was my mother's voice. "Oh, Sage, you made it." Jennifer Caldwell stood near the bar in a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She looked me up and down. "Is that the same dress from Easter? I feel like I've seen it." "It's a nice dress, Mom." She turned to the woman beside her, my Aunt Linda, and said, loud enough for me to hear, "I told her Nordstrom was having a sale. Some people just don't listen." Aunt Linda pressed her lips together and said nothing. I didn't respond. I guided Lily toward Evelyn's table near the head of the terrace. Evelyn was already seated, her silver hair pulled back neatly, her eyes bright and alert despite the cane resting against her chair. She saw Lily first, and her whole face changed. "There's my girl," Evelyn said, reaching both hands out. Lily ran to her. "Happy birthday, great-grandma. I made you a card." Evelyn opened it slowly. Inside, Lily had drawn the two of them sitting on a bench surrounded by flowers, with the words, "You're my favorite person," written in careful, uneven letters. Evelyn pressed the card to her chest. "This is the best gift I'll get tonight," she said. And she meant it. The evening moved forward. Appetizers were passed. Conversations hummed. Drew arrived 45 minutes late in a linen shirt unbuttoned one button too far, his wife Sierra trailing behind him in an emerald dress that looked like it had been selected specifically to be photographed. Their 2 boys, ages 5 and 7, ran straight to the dessert table without greeting anyone. Drew didn't acknowledge Evelyn. He walked to the bar, ordered a bourbon, and started holding court with 2 cousins near the fountain. At 7:30, Jennifer announced it was time for gifts. Drew's boys went first. Jennifer handed each of them a wrapped box. Inside, brand new iPads, the latest model. I watched the boys tear through the wrapping paper while Jennifer beamed and said, "Only the best for my grandbabies." Then Jennifer turned to Lily. She reached under the table and pulled out a small bag. Not wrapped, not ribboned. A plain plastic bag from a thrift store, the logo still visible on the side. "Here you go, sweetheart," Jennifer said, handing it to Lily with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Lily opened it carefully. She always opened things carefully. Inside was a doll, used, matted hair, one arm hanging by a thread, a crack running down the side of its face, the kind of thing you'd find at the bottom of a donation bin at a church basement. The table went quiet. Lily held the doll in both hands and stared at it. She didn't cry. Not yet. She just looked at it, turning it slowly, trying to understand. Jennifer leaned in, loud enough for the entire table to hear. "Sage's daughter should be used to hand-me-downs by now. That's more her speed, don't you think?" Someone at the far end of the table laughed. I couldn't tell who. 2 more joined in, then 3. Richard sat at the head of the table, eyes fixed on his plate, hands folded in his lap. He didn't look up. He didn't speak. Lily's chin trembled. Her fingers tightened around the doll. She looked up at me with eyes that were filling fast, and she whispered so quietly that only I could hear, "What did I do wrong, Mom?" Something inside me didn't snap. That's not the right word. Something inside me went perfectly, completely still, like a wire pulled taut, like the last tumbler clicking into place inside a lock that had been waiting years to open. I put my hand on Lily's shoulder. I didn't squeeze. I didn't pull her close. I just rested it there, steady and warm, and I said, "You didn't do anything wrong. Not one thing." And then Drew grabbed a microphone. He stood up near the cake table, bourbon in one hand, mic in the other, and he tapped it twice. The terrace went quiet. "I just want to say a few words about family," Drew said, grinning. He looked around the terrace like he owned it. Like every pair of eyes was a mirror reflecting something great back at him. This company, this legacy, it was built by people who took risks. People who showed up. People who put skin in the game. He paused, took a sip. Then he turned toward me. "And then there's Sage." A few people shifted in their seats. Sage, who sits in a cubicle all day crunching other people's numbers. Sage, who couldn't cut it in the family business, so she went and got herself a little desk job downtown. He laughed. A few people laughed with him. I mean, let's be honest. Let's just say what everyone's been thinking. He pointed the microphone toward me like a weapon. "This family is honestly embarrassed to even share a last name with you." The terrace didn't gasp. That's the part people always get wrong in stories like this. There was no dramatic intake of breath. There was just silence. A thick, suffocating silence that settled over every plate and every glass and every folded napkin like a sheet being draped over furniture in a house nobody lives in anymore. Jennifer nodded, slowly, deliberately, like Drew had finally said the thing she'd been rehearsing in her head for years. Richard cracked a small, reluctant smile, then looked back down at his plate. Sierra raised her glass an inch. Lily's small hand found my sleeve under the table. Her fingers twisted the fabric until her knuckles went white. I looked at Drew. I looked at him for a long time, long enough that the smile started to slip from his face, just a fraction, just enough to show the uncertainty underneath. "I heard you, Drew," I said. My voice was level, calm, not loud, not soft, just even. "I think everyone in this room heard you." Then I looked across the table at Evelyn. Evelyn Caldwell, 82 years old, the woman who built Caldwell Shore Properties from a single foreclosed duplex and a borrowed truck in 1974, sat perfectly still in her chair. Her hands rested on the table. Her eyes were clear. She was looking at Lily, at the broken doll in Lily's lap, at the tears Lily was trying so hard not to let fall. Then Evelyn looked at me, and she nodded. One nod, small, final. And that was the moment everything changed. I didn't sleep that night. I wasn't upset. I wasn't replaying Drew's words, or my mother's laughter, or the sound of Lily's whisper asking me what she'd done wrong. I was past all of that. I'd been past it the moment Evelyn nodded. I sat at my kitchen table in Charlotte at 1:47 a.m., with my laptop open and my phone beside it. Lily was asleep down the hall. The house was dark except for the glow of the screen and the streetlight cutting through the blinds. I pulled up the folder I'd been building for 6 months. Not days, not weeks. 6 months. Since the afternoon Evelyn called me to her room at the care facility, closed the door, and said, "I need you to sit down and listen carefully." That was when she told me about the founder's share. When Evelyn incorporated Caldwell Shore Properties in 1974, she'd written a single provision into the founding charter that no one had ever bothered to read. Not Richard, not Jennifer, not Drew, not even the company's outside counsel, because Harrison Miller, Evelyn's personal estate attorney for 41 years, had drafted it separately, filed it with the original articles, and never mentioned it in a single board meeting. The founder's share gave Evelyn a one-time, irrevocable right to reassign the board of directors, transfer controlling interest in all deeded properties, and restructure the family trust. One time, non-contestable, no vote required, no approval needed, just her signature, a witness, and a notarized filing. She'd been holding that card for 48 years, waiting, watching. 6 months ago, she decided it was time to play it. Harrison Miller prepared the documents. Every page, every clause, every transfer schedule and property deed and board resolution. He worked quietly, billing through a separate account Evelyn maintained that no one in the family knew existed. He reviewed the tax implications, the filing requirements, the notification protocols. He mapped every property in the Caldwell Shore portfolio, 14 residential holdings, 6 commercial leases, 2 vacation properties, and the Raleigh house my parents had been living in rent-free for 19 years. All of it was held in Evelyn's trust. All of it was subject to the founder's share. I didn't ask Evelyn to do this. I need to be clear about that. I didn't lobby. I didn't hint. I didn't position myself. She came to me because she'd been watching for years, watching me pay her care bills in silence, watching Drew bleed the company dry, watching Richard and Jennifer strip her name from board minutes while cashing checks drawn on her legacy. She chose me because I was the only one who had earned it. The documents were signed on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks before the birthday party. Evelyn signed them in Harrison Miller's office on East Boulevard in Charlotte. I was the witness. Harrison notarized every page. The amended trust transferred 72% controlling interest in Caldwell Shore Properties to me, effective upon filing. Drew's share was reduced to a 3% non-voting stake. Richard and Jennifer were permanently removed from the board of directors. The Raleigh house, the Hilton Head cottage, and the Outer Banks property were deeded to me outright. By the time Drew grabbed that microphone on Saturday evening, the documents had been filed with the Mecklenburg County Register of Deeds for 18 days. He just didn't know it yet. I sat at my kitchen table and opened my email. One message to Harrison Miller, 4 words. Monday morning, 8 sharp. I closed the laptop. I finished the coffee that had gone cold hours ago. I walked down the hall and stood in Lily's doorway for a long time, watching her sleep with one arm curled around the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 3. I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, not satisfaction, just clarity. Clean and sharp and final, like the edge of a blade that had been waiting to be drawn. Monday came. At 7:58 a.m., Harrison Miller was seated in the main conference room at Caldwell Shore Properties' office on South Tryon Street. He wore a charcoal suit, wire-rimmed glasses, and a leather portfolio containing 47 pages of executed legal documents. He'd arrived before the receptionist. At 8:04 a.m., Drew Caldwell pulled into the parking garage in a leased BMW. He walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the 4th floor. The doors opened. He stepped out, turned left toward his corner office, and swiped his key card. Red light. He swiped again. Red. He looked at the card, flipped it over, swiped a 3rd time. Red. The receptionist, a woman named Claire who'd worked the front desk for 11 years, looked up from her monitor. "Mr. Caldwell, you'll want to go to the main conference room. There's a meeting." Drew stared at her. "What meeting? Nobody told me about a meeting." "Conference room B. They're waiting for you." Drew walked down the hall. He pushed open the glass door. Harrison Miller sat at the far end of the long table, documents spread in front of him in neat rows. I sat to Harrison's left. My hands were folded on the table. My face showed nothing. Drew stopped in the doorway. "What is this?" "Sit down, Drew," I said. "Why is he here?" Drew pointed at Harrison. "This is Grandma's lawyer. What's going on?" "Sit down." He sat, not because I told him to, because something in the room, the silence, the documents, The way Harrison hadn't looked up told him that standing would make it worse. Harrison opened the portfolio. Effective September 14th, Harrison said, his voice measured and practiced. Evelyn Caldwell exercised the founder's share provision embedded in the original Articles of Incorporation of Caldwell Shore Properties, dated March 1974. Pursuant to that provision, the following actions have been executed and filed with the Mecklenburg County Register of Deeds. Drew's jaw tightened. His eyes darted to me. I didn't blink. Harrison continued. Item 1. 72% controlling interest in Caldwell Shore Properties has been irrevocably transferred to Sage Caldwell. Item 2. Drew Caldwell's ownership stake has been reduced to 3%, non-voting. Item 3. Richard and Jennifer Caldwell have been permanently removed from the board of directors. Item 4. The following properties have been deeded to Sage Caldwell in fee simple: the Raleigh residence at 4412 Glenwood Avenue, the Hilton Head Cottage, and the Outer Banks property. Drew's face went white, not red, white, like the blood had simply decided to leave. You can't do this, he said. His voice cracked on the third word. It's already done, Harrison said. The documents were filed 18 days ago. The provision is non-contestable. Drew's chair scraped backward. He shot to his feet. This is insane. Dad is the president. You can't just remove... Richard Caldwell held the title of president at the pleasure of the board, Harrison said, adjusting his glasses. The board has been reconstituted. His position has been terminated. Drew looked at me. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. You planned this. I didn't respond. I just looked at him, the same way I'd looked at him on Saturday night when he held that microphone and told 30 people I was a family embarrassment. I want to call Dad, Drew said. You can call anyone you'd like after this meeting, Harrison replied, but I should inform you that identical notification packages were couriered to Richard and Jennifer Caldwell's residence at 7:45 this morning. They've already been served. Drew's phone was already in his hand. He dialed. I could hear the ringing from across the table. Richard picked up on the fourth ring. Dad. Drew's voice was tight, barely controlled. Did you get something from Harrison Miller this morning? I couldn't hear Richard's words, but I could hear the tone. Low, stunned. The sound of a man reading a document that had just erased 19 years of free housing. Drew hung up without saying goodbye. He turned to me. His eyes were wet, but his jaw was hard. You're holding this company hostage. No, I said. I'm running it. This is financial murder, Sage. You know that, right? You're killing this family. I stayed quiet. There was nothing to add. The house, Drew said, and now his voice had changed. The bravado was gone. He sounded like someone doing math in his head and not liking the answer. The Raleigh house. Mom and Dad live there. I'm aware. You can't just... They have 30 days to vacate or sign a lease at fair market value, $6,500 a month. Drew's knees buckled slightly. He caught himself on the edge of the table. $6,000. They can't afford that. That's not my problem to solve anymore. The room was silent. Harrison began organizing the documents back into his portfolio. The meeting was over. Drew stood there for another 10 seconds. He opened his mouth one more time, and I watched him search for words, for a threat, a plea, an insult, anything, and find nothing. He turned and walked out. The glass door swung shut behind him with a soft click. If you've ever had a family member treat you like you didn't matter, hit that like button and subscribe. The call started at 9:17 a.m. Jennifer first. I saw her name on my screen, watched it ring 3 times, and pressed decline. She called again at 9:19, again at 9:22. At 9:31, Richard's number appeared. I let it go to voicemail. By noon, I had 14 missed calls, 9 voicemails, and 43 text messages. I didn't read them. I didn't listen to a single voicemail. I turned off the ringer and placed my phone face down on my desk. At 6:15 that evening, my doorbell rang. I was making dinner. Lily was at the kitchen table doing homework, her pencil moving in slow, careful strokes across lined paper. The doorbell rang once, then again, then 3 times in rapid succession. I walked to the door, looked through the peephole. Richard and Jennifer stood on my front step. Richard's shirt was untucked. His eyes were red-rimmed and glassy. Jennifer's mascara had smudged under both eyes. She was holding a folder, the notification package Harrison had sent, clenched in both hands like she was trying to strangle it. I opened the door. I kept my hand on the frame. I didn't step aside. "Sage?" Jennifer's voice was raw, stripped of every note of condescension I'd heard for 36 years. "We need to talk about this." "There's nothing to discuss." "The house, Sage. You can't take our house." "It was never your house. It was Evelyn's. Now it's mine." Richard cleared his throat. "There's also the matter of—" He stopped, swallowed. "The tax liability." "The $1,140,000 gift tax triggered by the trust restructuring," I said. "Yes. Harrison explained that to you in the notification. You're both personally liable." Jennifer's hand went to her chest. Richard's face collapsed in slow motion, like a building losing its foundation floor by floor. "We can't pay that," Jennifer whispered. "You know we can't pay that." "The board seat is gone, Richard, and the keys to the Raleigh house are already on my desk. You have 30 days. Jennifer took a step forward. "Sage, please, think about what you're doing. We're your parents." I looked at her. I thought about Lily's face holding that broken doll. I thought about the laughter. I thought about $151,200 in nursing bills paid in silence, while this woman mocked my dresses and told her friends her daughter pushed numbers for a living. "You were my parents," I said. "You chose not to be." Jennifer opened her mouth, closed it. Her chin trembled the way Lily's had on Saturday night, and for one fraction of a second, I almost felt something. Almost. "Good night," I said. I closed the door, not a slam. Just the quiet click of the lock sliding into place. I stood there for a moment, my hand still on the knob, listening to the silence on the other side. Then I heard footsteps retreating down the walkway, a car door opening, closing, the engine starting. Lily's voice came from the kitchen. "Mom, who is at the door?" I walked back to her. I sat down beside her. I picked up her pencil where it had rolled off the table and handed it back to her. "Nobody important, baby." She looked at me for a long moment with those clear, knowing eyes. Then she nodded and went back to her homework. The house was quiet. The ringer was off. The lock was set. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like breathing. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table at 5:40 a.m. with a cup of coffee and my phone. The screen was still dark. I'd left the ringer off all night. When I turned it on, the notifications loaded in a long, scrolling cascade. 67 missed calls, 31 voicemails, hundreds of texts. Drew, Jennifer, Richard, Aunt Linda, 2 cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. A number I didn't recognize that turned out to be Sierra, Drew's wife, who had apparently decided this was now her crisis to manage. I didn't read any of it. I opened my contacts. I scrolled to Drew Caldwell, blocked. Jennifer Caldwell, blocked. Richard Caldwell, blocked. Sierra Caldwell, blocked. I went through the list slowly, deliberately, the way you'd go through a filing cabinet removing folders that no longer belong. Aunt Linda, blocked. Cousin Paul, blocked. The unknown numbers Sierra had used, blocked. I removed myself from the family group chat. I deleted the shared photo album Jennifer had created 3 Christmases ago, the one filled with pictures of Drew's boys opening gifts while Lily sat in the corner of the frame, barely visible. I removed Richard and Jennifer from my emergency contact list and replaced them with my colleague Margaret from the bank and Evelyn's care coordinator. I changed the gate code on my building's parking garage. I updated the visitor authorization list at the front desk, removing every Caldwell name except Evelyn's. I did all of it in 22 minutes. I didn't do it in anger. I did it in clarity. Then I made Lily breakfast. The weeks that followed were the quietest of my life. Not empty quiet. Not the heavy, suffocating quiet of swallowing something bitter and pretending it didn't burn. This was different. This was clean. Like a room after every piece of broken furniture has been carried out and the windows have been opened for the first time in years. I went to work. I came home. I made dinner. I helped Lily with her homework. I visited Evelyn on Sunday mornings, same as always, with lemon cake from the bakery on Park Road. Lily would sit on the edge of Evelyn's chair and read aloud from whatever book she was working through that week, and Evelyn would close her eyes and listen with her hand resting on Lily's arm, and I would sit across from them and feel something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten the word for it. Peace. I didn't seek updates on Drew or my parents. I didn't ask around. I didn't check their social media, but Charlotte is a mid-sized city, and the real estate community in the Carolinas is smaller than people think. Information has a way of arriving whether you request it or not. 3 weeks after the trust transfer, Drew was formally terminated from Caldwell Shore Properties. The new board, which now consisted of me, Harrison Miller, and an independent director I'd recruited from a commercial brokerage in Raleigh, reviewed the company's books during the transition audit. What we found was worse than I'd expected, and I'd expected a lot. $110,000 in personal charges run through the company's operating account over the previous 28 months. Filed underline items like client entertainment, business development, and miscellaneous office expenses. The actual charges included $4,000 golf weekends at Pinehurst, $6,200 in bottle service tabs at clubs in Miami and Charleston, $8,400 in online gambling deposits routed through a payment processor in Delaware, $3,800 in clothing from 3 different designer retailers, and $2,100 for a weekend spa trip that Sierra had taken with 2 friends in Asheville. All of it documented, all of it time-stamped, all of it traceable. The board voted unanimously to refer the findings to an independent forensic auditor and to file a formal complaint with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. Drew's broker license was suspended within 6 weeks. The commission opened an investigation. Word travels fast in real estate. By the time the suspension became public record, Drew's name was already circulating on every broker blacklist in the Carolinas. I didn't make calls. I didn't send emails. I didn't have to. The documentation spoke for itself. Background checks caught the rest. 8 months after the birthday party, this is what remained of Drew Caldwell's life. The BMW was gone, returned to the leasing company after he missed 2 consecutive payments. He was driving a 12-year-old Honda Accord with a cracked windshield and 147,000 miles on the odometer. He'd taken a job at Miller's Interstate Auto, a used car lot off AA85 near Concord, working on commission. His best month, according to someone who knew someone who worked the lot, was a $2,300 check before taxes. His worst month was $740. Sierra filed for separation 4 months after the lockout. She moved in with her sister in Wilmington and took the boys with her. The emerald dress and the designer armor and the raised champagne glass were gone. The last anyone heard, she was interviewing for an office manager position at a dental practice. Drew moved into a 1-bedroom apartment off Independence Boulevard, the kind of complex with outdoor corridors and a shared laundry room in the basement that smelled like mildew and dryer lint. His 3% non-voting stake in Caldwell Shore Properties paid no dividends, carried no authority, and couldn't be sold without board approval, which I had no intention of granting. My parents fared no better. The $1,140,000 gift tax liability arrived in the form of an IRS notice 37 days after the trust restructuring was filed. Harrison Miller had explained it to them clearly in the notification package. The transfer of assets triggered a taxable event. The liability fell on the grantors. That was Richard and Jennifer. They had 31 days to respond with a payment plan or face penalties and interest accrual. Richard liquidated his retirement accounts. All of them. A 401k with $388,000 in accumulated savings, an IRA with $112,000, and a small brokerage account with $47,000. After early withdrawal penalties and federal taxes on the distributions, he netted approximately $436,000. Not enough. Not even close. Jennifer sold the jewelry first. Pieces she'd collected over 30 years. Rings, bracelets, a pearl necklace Richard had given her for their 25th anniversary. The jewelry brought in $38,000 at a consignment shop in Raleigh. She sold her car, a 2-year-old Lexus, for $31,000 under market value because they needed the cash fast. They still owed over $600,000. They listed the Raleigh house. Not because they owned it, I owned it now, but because I'd given them the option to manage the sale as my agents in exchange for a reduced commission that they could apply toward the tax debt. Harrison structured the arrangement. They accepted because they had no alternative. The house sold in 11 weeks for $487,000. After closing costs and the commission reduction, $419,000 went directly to their IRS payment plan. Richard and Jennifer Caldwell moved into a 2-bedroom rental apartment in a complex off Capitol Boulevard in North Raleigh. $1,650 a month, one assigned parking spot, no garage, no yard. Richard, 64 years old, picked up part-time consulting work for a property management firm, reviewing lease agreements and tenant applications. $22 an hour, 25 hours a week. Jennifer, 62, hadn't worked outside the home in over 30 years. She took a position at a boutique in Cameron Village, folding clothes and ringing up sales on a register for $14.50 an hour. The monthly family dinner stopped. Not because I ended them, because there was no family left to sit at the table. I heard through Harrison months later that Drew had shown up at the apartment one evening, that he sat in the kitchen with Richard and Jennifer, and none of them spoke for a long time. That Jennifer finally said, "If only we treated her differently." That Richard stared at the wall and said nothing, the way he'd always said nothing, except now the silence wasn't permission. It was regret. I didn't feel satisfaction when I heard that. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the same thing I'd felt the night I closed my front door with the lock clicking softly into place. Relief. Just relief. 1 year later, everything had changed. I moved Evelyn into my condo in Charlotte. We converted the guest room into her space. New bed, her favorite quilt from the Raleigh house, the small bookshelf she'd had since the 1960s. Her care team visited daily. She had her own chair on the balcony overlooking the tree line, and most evenings she sat there with a cup of tea and watched the light change over the rooftops. Lily was in the 3rd grade. She'd made the honor roll 2 quarters in a row. She'd joined the school science club and a Saturday morning soccer league. She had friends, real friends, the kind who came over for sleepovers and left thank you drawings on the refrigerator. I promoted 2 new property managers, renegotiated the commercial leases on 4 of the 6 retail spaces, and increased the portfolio's annual revenue by 11%. Caldwell Shore Properties was stable, healthy, run by people who earned their seats. On a Saturday evening in October, almost exactly 1 year after the birthday party, Lily and I sat on the balcony with Evelyn. The air was cool. The last light of the day was fading behind the buildings to the west. Lily was on the floor with a new telescope she'd saved up for with her allowance, tilting it toward the sky, waiting for the first star. Evelyn reached over and placed her hand on mine. "You did the right thing," she said. I looked at her clear, steady eyes, at the woman who'd built an empire from a foreclosed duplex and a borrowed truck and had waited 48 years to make sure it ended up in the right hands. "I know," I said. Lily looked up from the telescope. "Mom, I found one. First star." "Make a wish," Evelyn said. Lily scrunched her face, closed her eyes tight, and held it for 3 full seconds. Then she opened them and smiled. "What did you wish for?" I asked. She shook her head. "Can't tell, but it's already true anyway." I looked at her clear eyes and her steady hands and the way she sat there, confident, unbothered, whole. Not the girl with the broken doll and the trembling chin. Not the girl who whispered, "What did I do wrong?" While 30 people looked the other way, this girl knew exactly who she was. And she knew exactly who had her. The telescope caught the light from the street below and threw a small, bright point across the ceiling. The house was quiet. The phone was silent. No one was coming to the door. Some doors close so better ones can open. I never regretted a single second of it. If you enjoyed this story about protecting your children, setting boundaries, and knowing your worth, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.